August 1996, commissioners from the TRC arrived in Sebokeng for 4 days of public hearings on human rights violations committed in the area under apartheid and during the political transition. Over the course of 45 days, 35 witnesses recounted any variety of acts of torture, humiliation, and violence to which they subjected. Yet strangely, despite Sebokeng's national historical importance, one individual featured more than any other single person in witnesses' accounts. Dead for over 3 years, the ghost of Victor Khetisi Keswa, pictured on board, haunted the Sebokeng hearings. Now, what was even more peculiar about Khetisi's prominent place in the hearings was that the TRC was legislatively mandated to investigate acts that were specifically political in nature. And yet Khetisi was frequently referred to as at hearings as one of the most well-known gangsters in the township. So this presents a puzzle. Why would an alleged criminal take up such a large percentage of a township's hearings? Perhaps even more peculiar, though, was that Khetisi's place in the hearings was the involvement of his mother, Emma Keswa. Even though Khetisi's gang had allegedly committed one of the worst massacres in South African history, had been implicated in numerous other massacres, and had been accused of multiple individual murders, Khetisi's mother was put on stage during the TRC hearings as a victim of human rights abuses. So Khetisi had been implicated in such wide-ranging atrocities, and his mother had been accused, at times, of enabling him. Why would the TRC place her on stage as a victim of human rights abuses? And finally, all of this was done in the style of legal proceedings, staged for the public akin to the proceduralist legal practices being rolled out by the emerging democratic state. Yet the strangeness of the Khetisi hearings reversed many binaries upon which its jurisprudential mandate relied. Apparent criminals became political figures, accused perpetrators of violence became victims. And so the paper asks, what do these reversals at Khetisi's TRC hearings reveal about democratic state formation broadly? So the chapter argues that the TRC reveals that the TRC hearings reveals key challenges of post-apartheid legal and state formation, because it was a spectacle that actively displayed to South Africa's citizens what the relationship amongst violence, the law, and the democratic state should be. Specifically, through the TRC's quasi-juridical form, the TRC presented the democratic state as a neutral arbiter of societal and political disputes directed at producing justice. After decades of revolutionary insurrection, the newly democratic state was desperately trying to regulate violence. And the TRC was one of South Africa's first and most dramatic attempts to counter this revolutionary violence and to show how the democratic state should be the rightful institutional apparatus through which to seek justice. It did this by unearthing the capricious violence of the apartheid state and by dramatizing the desirability of a democratic state constrained by legal procedures so that the regularized violence of democratic law could take over and govern social relations. As Clifford Geertz wrote of statecraft elsewhere, the TRC put forth, quote, an argument made over and over again in the consistent vocabulary ritual that through its neutrality, state law should regulate social relations. However, every argument has tensions built into it, and the TRC's argument was no different. The strangeness of the Khetisi's hearing suggests a key limitation of the kind of argument the TRC dramatized. That is, the hearing showed the resistance state-building projects faced in making procedurally neutral law the arbiter of disputes among citizens. By placing Khetisi's mother on the stage as a victim, the TRC unintentionally implicated the post-apartheid state in upholding her son's illicit violence. This failed performance, the paper suggests, mirrored the newly democratic state's challenge of getting the citizens to turn to the law for justice, as many citizens consider suspects' procedural rights as putting the law on the side of criminals. I don't have a lot of time to get into this, but basically part of what the paper does is try and show the ways in which the state builds its so-called juridical capital, a term developed by Pierre Bourdieu. So in other words, to get the state to become the sort of rightful repositor of justice. It looks at the daily practices and resistance to this via the Khetisi case. So why did this guy become so infamous? Well, quite simply because he was implicated in extraordinary violence. Some accounts I saw implicate him in something like up to 100 murders. The particular incident that made him especially famous followed a local dispute with actually a former friend of his. So he had grown up with a guy named Christopher Nangalembe. They'd been actually relatively close friends. They'd even committed crimes with each other during a period. However, they had a falling out as Khetisi's crime became increasingly severe and as Christopher joined the local self-defense unit. The details of what occurred are murky, but it appears that Khetisi had been dragged before a people's court, had been sentenced to death, and had been driven in a car to this playground in Sebokeng, where he managed to escape after being shot in the stomach. After his escape, his gang allegedly abducted Christopher, strangled him to death, and dumped him in a rubbish bin outside of Sebokeng. This is his grave. Following this, following Nangalembe's murder, they held a night vigil for him. Now, there were warnings from Khetisi's gang not to go forward with it. The family, under pressure from the local ANC comrades, went forward anyways, and they held a night vigil this is the Nangalembe home here, and they held a night vigil in this sort of open area. As people were singing, a group of men, it's not quite sure how many, lobbed hand grenades, shot AK-47s into the crowd, killing between 38 and 45 people. This is the line of graves in Sebokeng today. It's literally as far as the eye can see. So clearly, Khetisi was an extraordinarily the day after this massacre. The ANC self-defense unit burned down Khetisi's mother's house, drove her from the township, and necklaced several other people. So why is this important for TRC? Well, interestingly, Khetisi's mother, Emma Keswa, pictured here, was put on stage as a victim of the community and of the state. Khetisi was eventually killed by the police, allegedly by the police, to cover up his involvement in helping the police commit a series of murders. Nonetheless, though, because her son had been killed, that she'd been driven from her house, the TRC put her on stage as a victim of human rights abuses. This is a screenshot from the hearing. You can see it was absolutely packed, absolutely packed. As the hearing proceeded, it had all the normal rituals of TRC hearings. I get into much more in the paper than I have time here. But basically, at one point, Emma Keswa breaks down in tears as she recounts the violence to which she and her son had been subjected. Nonetheless, though, she was not perceived in any way by the crowd. Indeed, as she starts to recount her testimony, people start to grumble, call out, boo in a few cases, sort of forcing the moderator for the day, Joyce Soroke, to repeatedly come in and silence the crowd and chastise them, saying something to the effect of, we are here to be neutral. The TRC is neutral and to take both sides into account. The challenge is, of course, that to the crowd, it was actually, there is no neutrality. Emma Keswa was not a victim, she was a perpetrator to the crowd's mind. The paper argues that this mirrors some broader challenges that South African state formation faced. Vigilantism is quite common in Sebokeng today. And part of the challenge is, and my ethnographic research showed, is that people argue essentially that the law is on the side of criminals, not on the side of the community, because of course it's the law, or it's the criminal that is the wrongdoer, not the community who actually beats it.